right, we will go ahead and get started. We will use mics so that it will be recorded appropriately. I know that everyone's quite close, so it might feel weird, but we're very excited today. We are here with our panel on generational grit. This really kind of was Miel's idea. I don't know if she remembers this. I don't know, whenever the pandemic started at some point, and talking about student parent things and how when she was a kid, her mom was in school, and that sort of this idea popped in my head of like doing a panel around that. What I really loved, I don't know if you remember you said this either. I was like, great, I don't remember this stuff. But the idea that it's really kind of a love letter to student parents, because I think a lot of times it's hard in the moment when there's a lot of stress and everything going on of like, why am I still in school, or why am I going through all this? Why am I sometimes maybe missing out on something? And so that we kind of wanted to have this so people could hear and also record it so we can sometimes maybe show it to student parents, because I think it's really impactful, the long term, the short term and the long term sort of impact. So thanks everyone for being here. So I think we're gonna start, if you don't mind, kind of introducing yourselves, telling just kind of a little bit about like the context, like when your parent was in school, how old you were. I know for Emma, your parent is still in school. So we're very excited Emma's here to join us in the preteen representation category. And then I have some questions, and we'll also let the audience ask questions as well, and kind of go from there. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miel McCarthy, she, her, hers pronouns. And I was, I think, 2 or 3 when my mom started going to college. And I don't quite remember how old I was, 7, 8 maybe, when she finished. So it was sort of my earlier years where I don't have a ton of very specific memories of her being in school. Except I do remember being on campus. Like there's a couple super vivid memories of being like at her work study job, and her boss had like the best snacks, like the things my mom wouldn't let me normally eat, sugar and things like that. So I remember that, and I remember going to class with her sometimes. But yeah, very impactful, and I'm sure we'll share more through the questions.
Hi, my name is Emma Patterson. My mom goes here, and
That's
say
good.
about that.
Do you remember how old you were when she started going?
Oh, I was either 8 or 9 when she started, and she originally didn't go to this school, but she went to Front Range Community College in Longmont, and then a couple years ago she switched to CSU.
Thanks.
Hello, my name's Jenny Kim. I use she, her pronouns. My mom divorced my dad in the summer and started in the fall. And so I was 3, and she graduated when I was like 7 or 8. I went to a preschool, on-campus preschool. I remember going to classes. I also remember being, they had human development class, and like they were watching us, so like I was part of a study. There's a funny story there, but won't get into that yet.
You can actually keep that one. Can you speak to sort of like the top, sort of both short-term and long-term impacts you think having a student parent had on you, or is having on you in the current tense for you, Emma? And if anyone wants to pass, feel free.
Okay, I'll kick us off then. Okay, it's harder for me to think about the short-term impacts. My mom went to CSU, and we lived in Aggie Village. There used to be 2 Aggie villages. Prospect was in between them, so we lived in the one that is still standing. And I remember thinking that was really cool because there was a lot of kids, and there was like this giant courtyard, and we would just like run amok in there. And every once in a while, a parent would like yell out from one of the doors, like, "Hey, stop doing that." But it was such like a fun childhood, and the birthday parties would be like huge because everyone in the whole apartment complex just went. So I think in those short-term impacts, I just remember feeling very connected to community and feeling like CSU was a part of that. I just knew that school was a big part of where I lived and also what my mom and I did during the day. And then similar to what Jenny shared, I went to daycare connected to CSU. And so it was just like in every part of what we did. The long-term impacts are far easier for me to talk about now. Obviously, I think CSU provided a sense of stability financially for my mom. There was opportunities for grants and scholarships and work study that as a single parent, I don't think would have been things she could have provided without some of what CSU gave. And so I can reflect on that now of like growing up in this apartment complex with all these kids, but also knowing that that gave us a roof over our heads and stability that I don't think we would have had she not been in school. But to that love letter idea that Lisa mentioned, I just remember thinking my mom was like, just like a superhero. Like I thought she was so cool. I still think she's very cool. But I just remember looking up to her so much, and I didn't understand that she was in school necessarily. Like I don't think that fully like was something I could articulate, but I knew what she was doing was something really, really cool. I thought she was just so smart. Like, obviously, I'm like sitting in these classes. I have no idea what they're talking about. But I remember sometimes my mom would raise her hand and she would share in class, and I was just like, wow, she's like a genius. And so it just had this really profound impact on me of, I think, setting a belief that I could also do something great with my life, that I could, whether that was college or a job or whatever, it instilled a lot of sense of like work ethic, I think, in like going after my dreams. And so she definitely instilled that in me by watching her chase this really challenging dream of being a single parent and trying to juggle college and work and obviously a kid. Now as a parent, I'm like, I really, really understand how hard that was for her and to do it on her own. So I think maybe even in retrospect, I still believe she was a superhero. I don't know how she made it through, but it has had a lasting impact on me, profound impact.
I think one of the short-term impacts about having a student parent is kind of like those days where you get to go up and do stuff with her. And then those are just like things that like when she graduates, those aren't things you're going to be doing anymore. But then the longer term impacts are like the memories of those things. And just like my mom was in school at the same time I was in school. And typically when I tell my friends, yeah, my mom's job, she works up at a school, but she also attends that school. They're like, your mom's still in school. And so I just feel like it's pretty interesting having like that, I don't know, just having a mom who's in college while also she has a home life. And it's just like two different sides of her almost. And I feel like that's really amazing to be able to control both sides of that life and not have them like merge too much together, because like if there's something you want to go do, she'll make time to go do it, and it won't be like where she's like, no, I have to go to work, and she's very flexible with that.
I feel very similar, Miel. It's hard to think about because we were so young. But one of the things I remember short term was my mom was able to come to school. I remember her like volunteering in the classroom, something I thought was normal. And she made time for that, right? Like on top of being a student and working. And so I remember, I don't remember, but my mom constantly tells me the story how I used to walk around and tell people like, I go college. And I'm like, now like, I still work at college. And so I think about also just like saying that as a young kid, and like college in my mind was never an option. And my mom says this day, like, that was her intention. She didn't want me to realize that like college wasn't just the next step after high school. And there are other options after high school. But I think it helped me see long term that I could do that, right? Watching her do that, watching her write papers, and the time she spent on that focusing really helped me see like, yeah, like this is something I can do, something I will do, because right, it wasn't an option to do. But I think that it also allowed her to be present in a way that, like as a single parent, right? Otherwise, she would have had to been working full time, and that ended up happening later on in my childhood. But it was nice, like that such a core important time of life, having her there and present. She like still talks about the kids who were in my elementary school, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't like that kid. And she goes, oh, I thought that kid was great. And I'm like, yeah, no, you misunderstood what was happening. But we can still like have those conversations, and it's just fun that she was there for it, and she knew what was happening. Yeah.
Anyone have questions you want to ask? I always have a lot, but anyone?
So do you think that your mom being in school or your parents being in school while you were kids had an impact on you deciding if you wanted to go to college after high school, or yeah, basically that?
So I've always wanted to go to college, but especially after like seeing my mom come up here so often and seeing how just how much she's learned and amazing things like that, I feel like it's definitely made me want to go to college even more for sure.
It wasn't an option, so yes.
I did come to college directly out of high school, but actually went about a year and a half and then took some time off. And I remember in that time out, I was working, and because I was not sure what I wanted to major in, so I was like, why spend the money? Maybe I won't even complete this whole degree thing. But I do remember very vividly one day, I was working in a grocery store, and it was in Florida, and it was hot and humid, and this person was just being, irate. They were upset about something. And it was this moment where I was like, my mom did not work her tail off for me to be doing this. She fought so hard to create a life for us through this avenue of her achieving a college degree. And that is not to downplay the importance of folks who work in lots of different industries, but I knew that there was more that I was dreaming for myself, and my mom had worked so hard. And so I think that reflection in the moment was like, yeah, I gotta go put the work ethic in that my mom displayed to me and taught me. And it really motivated me to get back in touch with what I had dreamed for myself and what I wanted to do with my life, because I think I'd just been sort of floating through life. And my mom was really gentle with me and allowed me to just kind of float for a little bit. Even though I'm sure internally she was just figure your stuff out. But eventually I did, and I think it was a lot of the example she had set. So I guess all to say, yes, it had an impact on me coming back to it after I took some time away.
Can I add to my sarcastic response? Thank you, Miel. It allowed me time to reflect and actually think a little bit deeper. What I didn't mention was I was one of 3 kids at the time, and so my mom just wasn't a single parent of me, but my 2 older brothers. And I know that college was something that she wasn't told was an option for her, and something that she had never dreamed of for herself. And so I knew she would tell these stories, and so I know that in the very least I knew I could be a strong, independent woman because of her, and whatever route that took me. And so, yes, I did go to college, but I think it impacted me even more on how I hold myself as a woman, how I'm also a small business owner. So, there are things that I've done that I probably would have never even dreamed for my high school self, just from the impact of, seeing her do it.
And just for context, because I know you neither of you mentioned this, but both Miel and Jenny work in in student affairs and have their Sahi degrees, and so wonder if that, or even like unconsciously played into like some of those paths that you took. So yeah. Get my steps in. No, you're good.
Yeah, just curious from the three of you, and thinking about students who are parents. So coming from each of your lenses, and some of this might be from your professional roles now, and then your current role, I think, is having a student who's a parent. Can you speak more to the superpowers, to go to what Miel was sharing, and be real? Because I think they've been mentioned, but I think it's important to kind of name them when we're all focused on hearing the many strengths that students who are parents are bring. What's the kryptonite, or what are the obstacles and challenges that we as a university create for students who are parents? And I don't mean like university. It could be me as an administrator. It could be students maybe who are traditional age. No offense to students who are traditional age, but there might be things we don't know we're doing. It could be the way we organize programs, when we do them, events and so forth. So like how to look at it, two sides of a coin of these amazing student parents. So what are those qualities? And the other is, what are the obstacles that institutions need to be more aware of? And so for you, especially you've got a parent right now as a student, like we want your guidance too. Now you might not know as much about CSU, but what could a university do to support your parent more? Okay.
Anyone want to start?
That's such a great question, John. And I'm sure, Emma, you probably have like some really good insight, because you probably can think of the things your mom says about what's been hard about this. But I'm also trying to remember back to what I would have said maybe when I was younger and my mom was in school versus what I know maybe now as a professional. So I'm going to go to maybe your second part of your question first, which is what's some of the kryptonite, what are some of the barriers? Because I remember really struggling with my mom sharing just how much of a struggle it was that everything at the time, at least, was done sort of in these very shortened hours. And so she was like using all 24 hours of the day. And yet at the time, I think the campus was very much like an 8 to 5. So she had to fit her work study into 8 to 5. She had to fit her classes into 8 to 5. Daycare was only open 8 to 5. And so there was just a lot of juggling she did. And I think that it's a little better today in terms of some resources like Ram Kids Village and things like that exist now that didn't exist then. But I would say that's still probably a challenge for probably any student, but particularly for folks who are parenting tiny humans that need to have someone with them all the time. They can't just leave them at home necessarily to make it to a group project, depending on their age or whatever. So I would say that. But what I will say back to the strengths is that my mom figured out, I think, how to squeeze like 30 hours out of a 24-hour day. And I think both Emma and Jenny mentioned this, like just her ability to still be present for me and the things that like mattered to me, whether it was my school play or my orchestra concert or whatever, the things that she always made priorities to be at. I don't know how she made all that fit into school and a work study job, but she did. And I never felt like I wanted for her time and her attention. And so I think there's just like an ability to organize that I'm like, gosh, if we could like figure out how to sell that, we'd like, I don't know. Well, that feels very capitalistic. So, but yeah, I mean, the world would just be a better place if there was a lot more student parents out there running the world. And so, yeah, I'll pause there and let other folks share.
So again, I'm gonna start with the second part of the question. Personally, I at least haven't heard anything from my mom negative about CSU. She's always very much just saying it's a really great school, unless she's in her geology class and she can't like identify one of the fossils, then she gets kind of angry and then asks help from my dad. But there's not much that I'd say is a challenge for her at CSU. And I forgot the first part of the question.
What are some strengths you see or like superpowers your mom has?
I think it's what back to how she balances like both her home life and her school life, and it's not too much of like, okay, I can only do homework this weekend. We can't go do anything. She very much balances that. As well as that, I feel like it's really amazing to be going through college, but not just going through college, having 2 children at home that she has to take care of. And I feel like that's just amazing for any person to be able to do. So I feel like that's a really big part, like one of her superpowers.
I figure I'll just keep the pattern going, so I'll start with the opportunities for growth. One of the things I think about is like financial barriers. So I know that my mom didn't technically qualify for the free daycare because of like child support or something like that. And luckily they were like, we have so many openings, let's just like, leave off one of these numbers. And so I specifically thinking about parents who might be getting alimony and or child support, like, yeah, FAFSA, they calculate the same for everybody. They don't take into account additional things about family contribution and those sorts of things. And so how can we be mindful of a university to ensure that, parents, student parents aren't having to take out additional student loans? Are there grants? Are there ways that we could make better decisions? And I've worked with financial aid here as a campus partner many of times, and I know how great partners are. And so, right, this was also a different school and university, and I'm sure there are folks who struggle. So that's one thought I have. Another thought is about classwork and like faculty expectations, right? So I think whenever you say students in your class, immediately you're thinking about a traditional age student who isn't a parent, and so there's a lot of assumptions made about why was this deadline not met. I remember one time I forgot to bring my teddy bear for Read to Your Teddy Bear Day in kindergarten. My mom had an exam, and I had a meltdown in the car, and she was like, I'll bring it later. And like, superpower, she ended up bringing it as soon as her exam was done. But also thinking about, like, she knew she couldn't be late because of those rigid policies of, if you're not there, the door is locked. And it's like, how do we leave flexibility and being mindful that there are good reasons, and your 5-year-old screaming is not super easy if she's refusing to leave the car. Yes, I refuse to leave the car. And so and then she's going into the exam with that additional stress. Sorry, Mom. And so, like, right, how do we allow for flexibility, and not just in the classroom, but also with deadlines and things that we're requiring. And then I think about services as well. So it's great that we have ALVS office here, and right, they can't be doing all the work for our student parents. I think about, I'll just reflect on my own area. So I work in the Career Center, right? If you're in class with your kids doing things from 9 to 5, where do you get your career? How do you make an appointment? And so something I've definitely pushed is like, can we have evening appointments? And what other places on campus are there opportunities for us to have things at different times of the day, maybe even weekends, maybe even inviting kids to come in? I always kept a coloring book just in case, right? And I knew that because I was a kid of a parent who was in school. And so we can just be mindful in those small ways too of like, how do we invite the kids in as well, especially thinking about them attending CSU someday and them being part of this family. It's not just those who are paying tuition, but it's also those part of the family. There are so many superpowers. It's hard to really be like, this is this one or this one. But I know my mom. I don't know. I think she can control time. That's the only reasonable explanation to how she was able to be there for so many things, and making it. Yes. always an opportunity for a Harry Potter reference. But she was always there, and it just that was just so important. As I reflect on being a new parent myself, of like how important it is just to have the time, and it was never, like you said, it was like never a burden. It was never like I can't do that because I need to study. Like we were the priority, and somehow she still got through school, and so. I still remember her graduating and seeing her in her cap and gown and just thinking like that is the cape of the superhero, right? And also imagining myself in it someday.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I noticed that for all of you, it was your mom who went to school, and I'm curious how the dynamics are different for fathers or going to school or single fathers. But I'm curious how having your mom go to school served as like a role model, or I know that a lot of times for mothers particularly, we expect them to have these superpowers. We expect them to do all the things, and was that hard for your mom? Like what was that like for them, do you think? And how did that help you like see them as people and stuff, I guess?
And just to add to that, I will also, both Miel and Jenny are parents themselves now, so I wonder if that also layers in when you think about that question as well.
So, I think it was a super big decision for my mom to come to school because I remember she had said, so she was in the Army and then she came out and then she had it's called a GPA or something like that. And so she was like, I really want to use this and I want to go to college. And I'm sure she would have in years prior, but she had 3 children to take care of. And that would have been hard to do that and go to school. But then she finally made this decision, and I think that was really brave for her because she knew that she'd then have to take on the responsibility of being able to do everything that the school required and all her classes and everything like that. But then she made time for her children, and I feel like it was a big decision for her, and it was either it was going to work or it wasn't. And I think it was a really good idea for her to decide to go to college, for sure.
I formulate while I talk, which could be problematic, so you do you.
Same. Okay, I'll take a stab at this. It's so hard to try to guess at what it might be like for a single parent or a parent who identifies as a father, because I only have the context of my mom. But I think what you asked really did hit a nerve in that I remember my mom, and again, was a single parent, so was juggling basically the role of 2. And I remember my mom so many times to the point where I'm like, I will not say this to my own children. But my mom saying to me, you can't wear that to school. She always said, you look like a ragamuffin. I don't know what that really means, but I think that's like a term. I don't know. But I took that to mean my clothes weren't maybe as clean or as crisp or whatever. I looked like I didn't maybe have an involved parent who was checking my clothes. And so she would always say you need to go change because it's going to reflect on me. So I think she very much felt as a mom that she had to make sure that everything was done perfectly, or she was going to be judged probably very unfairly in the court of public opinion. And I think also as a single mom, that was really something that was high at the surface for her. And as a woman of color, just the feeling she had about the judgment she experienced about being a single parent was a decision she made because of bad choices versus the bad choices of my father who left and didn't make sure that we were taken care of. And so I just remember that being very, very salient for her, is like, as a single mom, like, I gotta make sure that your homework is done, that you're dressed nicely, that you've eaten breakfast, that your snack is packed, like just the pressure. And I remember feeling that as a kid, like knowing that she was under a tremendous amount of stress to have everything be perfect, or at least look perfect to the outside world. And now, as a parent myself, I totally understand it, because I do have a partner who identifies as a man, and I still get the like notes home from school, like addressed to me, and I'm like, listen, schoolwork is his thing. This is the division of labor in our house. But the notes still come home to mom, and so I do think there's still some of that that happens in society around like the responsibility the mom has to the child versus the father. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but that's what came up when you asked.
When I think about like binary gender stereotypes, I think about like, right, man works and he's supposed to work and he's not supposed to. Like, my dad was like, he came to one thing in elementary school. I remember because it was one. My mom came to everything else. And I also remember times of my siblings crying because he didn't show up to the Father's Day lunch or something like that. And how, but that's okay because he's a dad, right? And so he should be working. He should be providing for the family, even though they're divorced. And so, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about like, when I think about like my father's involvement, it was very different. And I think sometimes that watching my mom do it all has also, like, I need to be critical and think about why do I feel like I need to do it all, because I do have a partner in the household who's a stay-at-home dad, and so, right, I don't have to do it all, and so trying to find where do I push in like just because I watched it all be done by my mom doesn't mean I have to also be the mom who does it all. And so and she's great because she's the one who will point out to me like, well, why didn't he do that while he was at home right? But she also recognizes what it's like to be at home with the kids, because that's what her role was before she went into college. And so, so I appreciate her like being able to give that back. But yeah, I think in like society and the way with Western culture is that like as a mom you're expected to do it all. You're expected to be a superhero, and like if you're not living up to that, then not only are you being criticized by people who aren't parents, but you're being criticized by other moms, and it's like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the decisions I think are best for my child, and yeah, my mom got me a book for my birthday recently called 7 Ways to Intentionally Traumatize Your Child, and it's a book about every kid's going to have some form of trauma. You've taken the steps to ensure that you know what trauma you're causing. And it's sarcasm, right? And it's like a really good recognition of like, we do the best we can in the moment. And I think that's to say with every parent, right? And we got to make decisions with the information that we have. And so that's what I try to live by. And that I think I like, right, what was role models for me when I got to see. I don't fully remember the question, so I hope that at least touched on it.
Other questions?
So my question is, what advice do you have for student parents who are currently attending CSU? Because life can get heavy sometimes, and life is a lot. And so what advice do you have for them to keep trucking along and finishing their degree? And what advice do you also have for incoming student parents who are considering, or parents who are considering to come back and get their degrees?
So I think that I don't really know, but I don't feel like my mom is doing anything wrong. So I feel like what she's doing, my advice would just be keep doing what you think is best for you, because in the end, you're ultimately going to have however many degrees you went for. And I think that However, like, just go with your gut, I guess, and just that basically would be my advice for her, because that's what she's been doing, and as far as I can tell, I feel like that's been working out amazingly.
Let your kids see your failure. Let them see the hard work. I remember how hard my mom worked for, I think it was like a C in physics, and right, and that helped me see like some of this you have to work hard for, and you know, sometimes that means you're up late. Sometimes that means you're yelling at the textbook, but that's okay. Like, that's part of the process. I think it's hard because you're like, well, I'm trying to keep it together because I don't want my right, and we were going through a lot, right? We were also going through a divorce. So it's like, oh, we gotta keep it together. I gotta keep it together. Gotta make it look like our family is fine and we're gonna be okay. But like, it's okay to have the emotion. It's okay to talk about, wow, this class is really hard, or you know, we're gonna get McDonald's tonight because Mama can't cook because she has to study for this. Like, and talk about it. Just be open about what's happening, because that's gonna help build their resiliency and grit as well. And so for incoming parents, like, if the kid's old enough, have conversations about, you know, what is it going to look like. You can set expectations, but, you know, as children go, those go out the window. And so what are ways to engage together, right? We're doing our homework together. This is homework time for both you and me. And so I think just being open about the process, being open about your feelings and how things are going is okay. I think children can handle a lot more than what we realize. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts. I said "and so," but I didn't have a continuation of that sentence, so thank you.
I think, as Emma sort of pointed out, like you said, you can't really think of anything that your mom's doing wrong. And I would echo that. Like, I think sometimes as parents we can be so hard on ourselves, and to just remember that our kids won't remember most of it. And so to just give grace. And if any of you have parented through the pandemic, like, I don't know how you did that in school, because I parented through the pandemic, and I feel like I'm still like, did I survive? I feel like I'm like holding on by a thread. Right? Yeah.
I laugh instead of crying. No.
Right. And so I guess I as a person who I'm considering going back for to complete some additional coursework, I think that question is like really on the top of my head of like, do I want to go back to school and finish a degree? Because it's a lot of work. And my kids are little. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so I think about, like, what am I going to miss out on with them? And then you hear that mantra all the time, you know, like, the days are long, but the years are short. And I'm like, it's so true. The years are short, and I don't want to miss anything. But what keeps coming up is what I learned from my mom, is that chasing your dreams is worth it, and that what it imparts to your children is that they can do it too. And so I'm gonna do it one of these semesters because I want to show them that I can do this big, hard thing, and that if I can do it, they can do it, because that is probably what I remember the most, is thinking about my mom, is like, if she can do it, like, then I can do something that's less hard. But now, as I'm thinking about doing something really hard as a parent, I'm like, okay, my mom showed me that it's possible. So I'll figure this out. We'll do homework together. You know, they'll have a different level of homework, but we'll do it together. We'll figure out how to make time and commit to our family things, and you know, make sure that we are at all of the important things. We'll just figure it out together. And I would imagine that most of us, you know, who are parenting these humans are like, we're a team, like it or not. You're on my team and I'm on yours, and we're going to figure this out together. And so I really believe that our children just remember so much good that comes out of it. And so I guess, yeah, the advice would be, give yourself grace, take the leap, be brave, and do it. It will pay off in the end. So yeah.
Thanks.
So I am currently a peer advisor with the ALVS, and I hope to one day work in higher education. I was wondering if you had any advice or if you could recall anything that was particularly impactful to make you feel like supported or included in the process when you were a child of a parent in school.
I'll speak for Emma. She gets to be on a panel. No, just kidding.
I mentioned a little bit in my intro that I was like invited to be involved in a lot. So some things I didn't mention is like my mom had to take a photography class, and so we went around town and we were the models. Me, my older brother. I do have a little brother who's 10 years younger than me. So clearly, parenting the three of us while going to college was not hard enough, and so needed another one 10 years later. Like right, I was in a study. I remember when I was in the classroom, faculty were really nice to me. There's a story of in the middle of an exam, my brother, in the middle of a silent exam, just spilling his entire bag of Skittles, and everyone just laughing, right? Like his immediate reaction is like, "Oh my gosh, I just made noise," and everyone's laughing, right? Made him feel like, "Oh, it's okay. Like we're gonna be okay." I did the same thing with like a VTech laptop once. I thought the sound was off. Definitely wasn't. I don't know how they are now, but in the 90s, those VTechs made some very fun noises when they turned on. But like never was like in trouble or reprimanded. It was just always fun and funny and okay. And so yeah, I think like just being included and really it was really the faculty that came down to like being open to that. And I think part of it was that the campus was more of a commuter campus, and so there was a good number of adult learners, and so I think that culture was kind of there. And I think something that we're like constantly trying to push on here and like reminding not just faculty but staff as well that there are adult learners and that sort of thing.
So one idea that is coming to mind, I think actually serves both the student, parent, and the children, is I remember sometimes feeling like I was making it harder for my mom. Like if she didn't have to be a parent and juggling all of this, that it would have been easier for her. And so the way I translate that into like an action we could do is I would have loved to be able to go to things that were just for me on campus, like an activity or something. And I bet you on the flip side, my mom would have loved to have the 2 hours or whatever that she knew I was in a safe place and I was having fun, and that she could work on campus and get stuff done and then like meet back up with me after the activity was over. So I think so often my experience on campus, like Jenny shared, was very welcoming. Like professors allowed me to come into class with my mom. I was allowed to go to my mom's work study job. So it was a welcoming place. But I also knew that my presence was making my mom's experience on campus different than a lot of the other people I was seeing. So I think to somehow like really lean into that and have done something on campus that was like just for me as one of the kids would have felt really cool. And like I said, I'm sure my mom would have like enjoyed the time too.
I'm going to pass, not because I don't want to answer, I just don't know what to say.
Other questions? I know we're getting close to the time. Do you have a quick question?
What advice, so not for student parents anymore, but what advice would you have to children whose students are parents, and how can they best support them through their... Yeah. Oh, their parents are students. Yes, sorry. So their parents are students. So yeah, what advice would you provide to them on like how to best support their family as they go through this together?
Yeah, is there something you wish someone had told you and you were like,
Don't throw chairs in the daycare, in the preschool. That makes a lot of stress for your parent.
did you get kicked out?
I did not get kicked out, but I did throw a chair, and then my mom had to get a talking to, right? I did too, but no, sorry. I have the sarcasm sometimes overrides proper answers.
It's such a good question. I can't think of how to answer. I guess I think it obviously so depends on the age of the children. Because when my mom started, I was like 2.5. I was somewhere between 2 to 3. I don't know that there's any advice you could have given me to help me understand what my mom was going through. But as I got older, probably like Emma's age, I think I definitely had a better understanding of like what my mom was experiencing. And so maybe had people given me advice at that point, it would have been to, I think what would have helped too is like a better explanation of all of the things that my mom was going through. So then I would have been able to maybe understand that I could have like entertained myself sometimes instead of asking, for so much attention, because I think she was willing to give it to me. And then I think that meant she had to stay up late, because I just didn't understand the amount of work she had to do. I knew that we went to classes together, but I didn't understand the concept of like how much reading and homework she had. And this was like pre-computers, so a lot of things were like she was writing. So I think about my kids now, sometimes they're like, "You're always on your computer." And so I think I would tell them like, Mom's gonna have to be on my computer a lot because I'm writing papers for a project that my teacher gave me. So like just, explaining it so that the kid can then, if age appropriate, that they can understand what the parent is doing, and then maybe make like different choices about what they're asking the parent to do. I don't know. That is such a good question. I'm thinking about it because I was just sharing that. I'm thinking about going back to school, and so I'm like, gosh, what advice would I want my kids to hear? So it's such a good question. You're going to make me think about that for a while.
It kind of sounds like the idea of like helping temper expectations. Like if you knew, okay, like this, like if you knew like, oh, this is finals week for my mom, like, okay, I'll like maybe ask for this to do the week before. Like you kind of like, it's kind of that idea which I think, Jenny, you mentioned, like kids can handle more than we think. And so I think sometimes explaining like, here's the situation, how can we make this mutually beneficial? We forget that depending on their age, a lot of kids can handle a lot of that piece. So I just want to be mindful because I know you have a meeting you have to get to, which is like now. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being on our panel. We really appreciate you all sharing kind of your experiences and learning more about what it was like for you. And I know that I think it was really impactful. And thank you all for really good questions and for being here. So let's give a round of applause.